Hello, Beach Boy fans. Welcome to the In My Beach Boys Room podcast. I am Adam Schreiner, sitting here with Matthew Hartz, world champion fiddle player. He is the Beach Boys expert. I am slowly becoming an expert. I mean, learning from you. We're in our 8th episode here. So you can follow us on Instagram at Matthew Hartz Music, or if you are on the Twitter thing, you can do Matthew_Hartz. If you want to do some supportive Patreon stuff, we have a Patreon page, and we appreciate anybody that listens and supports the podcast.
Yes.
If you want to check out some Beach Boys covers, Matthew has some covers on our YouTube channel of Little Do Scoop, and then he did some with his family. Really cool, and I think anybody who is a Beach Boys fan would probably appreciate them. So hop on over to our YouTube channel, check out some of those covers. They're pretty sweet.
And that's Matthew Hart's music.
Yes.
That's
there's some Matthew Hart's music stuff out there with all his fiddle career stuff, but make sure you find his actual official channel, and that will have all the Beach Boys stuff on it. So now we have shifted in the room a little bit, and now we've scooted over to the Smile
corner of the late 60s room.
Okay, so we've shifted from the previous episode. We've just literally moved about 4 feet to the right.
Yeah, because we're partway in, we're kind of in still fluid in 1966, shifting into 1967.
So, okay, so I see where I am physically, but explain to me what's going on here, Matthew, as far as the Beach Boys' career and progression goes.
Well, we just came off that really cool discussion of Pet Sounds, and so we have to talk about Good Vibrations, the tune now, which is obviously an obvious one.
Yeah, an obvious one when it comes to the Beach Boys.
It actually started during Pet Sounds.
Yeah,
he wrote it, and Tony Asher wrote some original lyrics to it.
So why?
And started work on it, I think in February of 66 was the first sessions at Western.
Just didn't make the cut, or what happened there?
From what I've been able to discern is that he knew it was a good idea, and he kind of felt like it might be a little bit different from the rest of the album, and thought, let me get to this after I get done with Pet Sounds.
Okay.
Kind of, I think, or maybe he just didn't.
Maybe it wasn't ready yet, or I don't know.
Started during Pet Sounds, though, is when they started recording Good Vibrations.
That's interesting. Okay.
But the recording of Good Vibrations is a legendary story in itself, because it took a long time. Lots of different time periods are stated in different books over the years, but it was a good many months, probably about 6 months.
Of recording it?
Yeah, from February in 66 until, it was released in October, I think, or something, and maybe they got done with in August. But after Pet Sounds was done, then he started revisiting it in the summer.
Okay.
And started finishing it up. So Good Vibrations is done in 3 and maybe even 4 different studios. I know there's
like different parts of the song.
Yes. And
interesting.
So, Good Vibrations is basically the first example of what we modular recording. It's different sections of music that were recorded in different studios and then edited together to make to one piece that flowed.
Interesting. Can you give me an example of like what was? Do you happen to know
Oh yeah.
What was recorded in what?
Well, you have the verse parts, which are the I love the colorful clothes she wears. The verse parts.
Yeah.
The music to that was recorded. That was the first sessions at Western.
Okay.
And then there's I think that the middle, what I call the honky tonk piano section. I think that might have been recorded at Western too. I'm not sure of the exact studios and which one was where, but especially in the end where it got to keep those Gotta keep those loving good vibrations. That's actually Dennis playing just an organ on there. It's very, very, and there's a little bit of percussion on there, but that part I know was recorded at a completely different studio. Yeah.
Okay.
And so Brian had envisioned this all along, but it was completely unprecedented,
To do something like that at that time. Sure. Yeah.
And what it is I mentioned modular recording. He's saying, wow, I've got these different sections of music. I could actually put them together a few different ways.
Right.
Okay. Because this, it's so another analogy I often give for it is like Pro Tools before Pro Tools, or not exactly, but it's like he wanted the flexibility that today's recording software gives you.
Gotcha.
And this is a way of kind of doing that in the most caveman way.
Right,
it's just like, it's really brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
And
way ahead of the time again.
Mm-hmm. And so that's how it was recorded. And it was recorded, mainly by the musicians known as the Wrecking Crew.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. I can't remember when it was, but and I don't know if there was that someone didn't like the original lyrics that Tony Asher wrote, or if Brian just decided to do something different, but Mike was given the job, say, hey, why don't you write some new lyrics for this? And he says that he did it on the way to the vocal session. He wrote them, he dictated them to his wife at the time, who was in the car, so that new verse lyrics. And so it's a Brian and Mike tune is what ends up being the writing credit on Good Vibrations.
All right.
So that's an interesting thing too.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
After Pet Sounds, and doing all that work with Tony
Asher,
and I like Tony's original lyrics, but I also like what Mike came up with in the end too. It was really great. You've got them doing some amazing singing on that, some really crazy vocal parts that Brian arranged for that, and famous chords being sung, like the way the sus4 or the 11th. I'm getting technical here. Everybody, all Beach Boy music nerd nuts know the magic chord thing in Good Vibrations. That's actually in a lot of other songs too, but just the way it's sung and presented, especially at that big before the end part comes back in.
Right,
just amazing.
Yeah.
Just really just signature
just
moments
else.
all over that record. I know another interesting thing about the middle section that I call the honky tonk piano section. I think I've seen Van Dyke demonstrate how they did that, and Brian and Van Dyke actually played the piano together, or maybe but actually was showing that part has always been so odd to me. Like, how did they get some of that movement, going on? And is it two? But literally is like two hands playing on top of each other. I can't remember where I saw that, but I did.
Wow.
Another cool thing about these Good Vibrations sessions, I'm not sure if it was Billy Hinchy that shot it, but I think he's the guy that had the film. They have film footage of them actually working on the vocals for Good Vibrations, and then also they have some footage of the Wrecking Crew guys like Hal Blaine and Lyle Ritz. I know for sure it's been just in the last few years. If you look up Good Vibrations studio session footage, it's the real deal, man.
Wow.
It is really powerful. It was really.
You can just like Google that or something.
Yep. It's all over YouTube. And I would really encourage anybody that hasn't seen that to, if you want to see what Brian looked like and he acted like, and all the other guys during the zenith of what they had going on, if you want to see what his mannerisms, if you're a nerd like me, go take a look at that. It's just really cool. So it is a huge smash.
Right.
Number one worldwide.
Wow.
I think it came in number one. They say it was like a big Christmas present in end of '66 is when it finally hit. I think it was released in October, but it was the biggest record of their career, really. And it came on the heels of the disappointment of the Pet Sounds, as
Right.
far as
Oh,
it
yeah,
being
yeah.
a commercial, not a commercial success, and Brian being disappointed by that, somehow,
Turns around and does that.
carries on and picks
Yeah.
this thing he discarded during Pet Sounds up. He picks it up and develops it into even a more radical departure than the Pet Sounds music had been, and rolls the dice on that, throws it out there, and it's a home run this time.
Yeah. No
So
kidding.
think of he must have really been confused, with Pet Sounds not being a commercial, and then do something even a little bit further out there, and it goes number one worldwide.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So after the disappointment of Pet Sounds, this was a huge boost, probably for his self-esteem and the Beach Boys just in general,
sure.
And trusting what he was doing.
Right.
And so while he was finishing Good Vibrations, he was already working on more material for what was to be the Smile album.
Okay, and so Good Vibrations, part of the Smile? Or
it had been a single.
It was a single.
Yeah.
Okay, so it hadn't been attached to any album
No,
at this point? Okay.
No, it was just an independently
Gotcha.
released
Okay.
single. Then, while that was being finished up, he started working on more tunes, and the man that he brought in was Dyke Parks.
Okay.
So Pet Sounds, he brought in Tony Asher. He brings in Dyke Parks for Smile.
Okay. For lyrics?
Yes.
Okay.
And Van Dyke Parks is an amazing musician, an amazing poet. He either met Van Dyke at David Crosby's house or through Danny Hutton or David Anderley. I'm not sure, but it was sometime in '65. But Van Dyke became enough of the landscape that he was in kind of at the end of the Pet Sounds period, and then he was Good Vibrations. I know for sure he was around because he suggested the use of the cello that's used in Good Vibration. There's a at the end of it. It's the real signature part of that tune, and that was Van Dyke Parks suggest. So he was in there, but he was already. I think Brian. What happened is Brian heard him talking at a party, and he thought he just sounded exceedingly hip and articulate, and thinking, "Man, I'll bet that guy writes good lyrics." And so he got in touch with him, and sure enough, they start working together. Van Dyke was just really poor. Said that he had to get Brian gave him some money so he could buy a car so he could get up there to work with him. But he was working as a musician, performing with his brother in the LA kind of beatnik scene. Great piano and guitar player, and had been doing some other real legitimate stuff with some other kind of big people. So that's how he got in that circle to meet Brian, I'm sure. So when Brian and Van Dyke, they started getting together and writing tunes and working on the record, it was all going to be in this modular style that Good Vibrations had. The whole album was going to be tunes like that could be
like recorded in different places
sections.
and then
Maybe not that, but they were going to make different sections of music for each tune that could be put together in any sort of an order. Also, it ends up, you can really tell Brian had symphonic things on his mind, because the motifs that show up in Good Vibrations, the first tune off Smile, I mean of Heroes and Villains, excuse me, did I just say Good Vibrations?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so Heroes and Villains, they end up being recycled in many of the other tunes, sprinkled in different ways all the way through the album. And so it's really a masterfully, it is a step beyond Pet Sounds in a whole lot of different areas, but it was really incredible creative thinking that was getting, so all the tunes are going to be in this style.
Sure.
It was also first titled Dumb Angel, which I think I've heard that it was a reference that Brian made to Dennis at one point, and it wasn't really derogatory at all, but it was somehow that. So the working title for Smile was Dumb Angel for a while.
Dumb Angel, but Dennis hasn't passed away yet, right?
No, Dennis would no. This is
So
in
nothing.
The 60,
There's no connection there.
No,
Oh,
he
okay,
was.
okay.
He died in '83.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, the atmosphere that Van Dyke was working with Brian in was really interesting because Brian had gotten real creative. This is the famous sandbox period where the piano's in the sandbox.
Yep, I know about that one.
The tent.
Yeah, I know about the tent.
Where they were
Yep.
smoking the hash and the living room furniture all moved out for the blue tumbling mat sometimes because everybody needed to exercise and be healthy, right? And I guess it was a little like being at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party because all the while Brian's chowing down on hamburgers and ice cream while he's preaching.
Telling everyone else to exercise.
Yeah. So it was just a really cool, I'm sure, extremely creative environment. And they had the luxury of, now Good Vibrations had been huge and the record company was going to give him all the leeway to be crazy as he wanted, you know? And so I guess I really felt like he felt enabled in a way to chase something
like this,
you know? So there's this, what I call the sandbox songs, because I've heard them referred to as that. And it's incredible. Heroes and Villains, Surf's Up, Cabinescence, and Wonderful. Each one of those songs just a study for any musician for a semester.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think it was in David Leaf's Beautiful Dreamer documentary. It was a hell of a sandbox.
Yeah. No kidding.
But with this new group of people in this new environment, unfortunately, probably came a lot of drugs. Yeah. And there was a lot of indulgence in that. And Brian, I know, there was a lot of LSD, a lot of cannabis. I'm not, not convinced that was the harmful part of it. But
sure.
But also a lot of amphetamine use, which was rampant within the music industry, and they didn't really know how damaging it was back then,
right.
And so a lot of this stuff is fairly, it's drug-fueled creativity too,
right.
Staying up till 4 or 5 in the morning,
not sleeping,
and you just, so with the new group of people, there was a lot of drugs around, and it really exacerbated Brian's sensitivity and in paranoia, especially. It really did have an obvious effect. I mean, you can see a definite shift in him from this point.
Okay.
Yeah, and as far as the other guys having problems with the smile stuff of being this is way out of left field now. How is anybody going to understand this? I really think a lot of it has to do with they could see what it was doing to Brian.
Right.
Even Mike.
Yeah.
If you listen to the Smile Box set, those guys were all cooperative. Those guys were still following Brian's lead. They were still making music for him. It didn't matter if it was weird, far out stuff. They were on board. They were doing the work. Yeah. I think those sessions exhibit that. When I want to talk a little bit more, we're not going to talk about every Smile track because I feel like there's already a lot of good information out there, detailing that,
sure,
to the nth degree. But I do want to talk about some of the other important music on Smile, and specifically the Elements section, or what Brian had envisioned for that, which was basically, earth, air, fire, and water.
Right.
People hypothesized that it's probably vegetables that was going to be the earth, and wind chimes is the air, and Mrs. O'Leary's cow, of course, is the fire, and the working title for the water track is I Love to Say Dada. The fire music has to be mentioned in particular here.
Okay.
First of all, when you listen to that all deconstructed on the Smile sessions, just even the music, it's brilliant music.
That's just the name of a song.
Well, it's the song. The name of the song is Mrs. O'Leary's Cow, to reference the famous Chicago fire that burned down almost the whole city in like the early 1900s.
Okay.
The cow famously kicked over a lantern and started the
Fire.
huge Chicago fire. And that's funny. When I got this T-shirt in Chicago when I went to see the Smile tour.
Oh, nice.
But so the fire music is without any vocals, and there wasn't thought forever. It was thought there weren't any vocals to it. The music is brilliant, and man, if anything depicts a big, scary fire, he found a way to do it in a kind of a rock and roll, gothic kind of it's
interesting.
I don't. Have you ever heard it?
I don't think I have.
Or I need to turn you on to that.
Something different.
It's mind blowing. I think.
Okay.
And he was able to do that. And what happened a few days after, I think, is what they say. A few buildings burned down in the area, like in close proximity.
Oh, weird.
And with all of the, all of the
everything that's
energy
going on,
with all of the
that
drugs
probably is
being taken and everything like that, it shook him to the core. And this is the point where I know that Dyke Parks, I think, says, this is the point where I realized that, this is not good. This is not good. This is turning on him.
Oh.
I think Mike Love and maybe some of the other Beach Boys made things uncomfortable for Van Dyke, and that's a reason why he left. I mean, Mike famously, the lyrics over and over, the crow flies uncover the cornfield in Cabin Essence. He asked him, what does that mean? He goes, and Van Dyke, well, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just poet, and so those are famous reasons why Van Dyke was, out. But he, in a documentary, I think it's Beautiful Dreamer, he says, I could see what was happening and I just couldn't be part of it anymore. And so he left and went to make his famous debut solo album, Song Cycle.
Oh,
which is really cool. That I think that he was able to go and do that in the aftermath of that whole thing, because this, like I said before, this is a marker to where Brian really changes as a human being. Some of the optimism was gone forever.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it makes sense if you're messing with substances and then you go and write a song and I mean, I can see I can see how the progression could lead to, especially I mean, just when you throw in that level of drugs, it kind of messes with you.
But then you couple it with Brian's was very fragile. That's it, Carl. It was just Brian.
Doesn't he even admit that?
Oh yes.
Yeah, he says, I've seen something where.
Oh yeah, he knows it. But he was really susceptible because he was so fragile and so sensitive to begin with. He had some mental issues to begin with. Everybody that knows him from way back said, he was always a little, there's something always a little bit different, and so then I really think what happened with the drugs is it just really exacerbated all of that stuff just hugely for him. Just made it, So anyway, let's talk about how I found out about Smile, which is, again, the Tobler book that was written in 1976 when I was reading it in about 79. Got to that section, and the songs called "Do You Like Worms" and "Barnyard" and "The Old Master Painter" and "The Elements." I remember reading, I go, what? And I remember thinking, well, that's really odd. I wonder if I didn't even think at that point that it was something that had ever been saved or I would ever be able to hear. I thought, this is just a legend of something that went on that never happened, right?
Oh.
Then later on, about 10 years later, when I'm, in my late teens, I find out, the Smile stuff was all recorded. It's actually the stuff that showed up on Smiley Smile and some of the other albums that I knew at that, they're all different versions. And whoa, wait a second, but less was known about Smile than even Pet Sounds back in the day, where I think in the Pet Sounds episode, I mentioned that there wasn't a lot of information around about it
right
for a while,
right.
and even less was known about Smile.
Sure.
So this was uncharted territory for most people. When I was in college down in Texas, I ended up joining some Beach Boy fanzines, in specific a California Saga guy named Rick Colville in New Jersey. There were some advertisements in the back, a trade magazine, saying that there were these Smile bootlegs available, that they were just, and so I ordered them, and they were all just hand recorded. I mean, just independently, probably duped cassette tapes, and with handwritten titles on Rick or whoever did this. They did
got a hold of them.
I've still got all of them. I should have had them out for props for this thing. But anyway, that was when I first heard the music. And buddy, when I got those things in the mail, I didn't go to school for a while.
Yeah. Called in sick. Listen
Wonderful.
To some,
the original harpsichord version of Wonderful, after hearing and loving the Smiley Smile version for almost all my life. And then to hear Brian's original Smile version of that, I mean, I cried. I cried. It is just that chord progression in that song is just, it's, and just the way he uses the inversions and it's just so great. And then to be able to hear that was one of the things on those bootlegs that really stands out. But hearing all the fire music for the first time, I had never, I guess I had heard that on the Malcolm Leo film a little bit, but a lot of big moments.
Can I ask, when you're like devouring at this time, when you're devouring this music, are you like just fully on into listening, like in the dark? Are you trying to figure out, are you trying to play with it? How are you listening to this?
At first, I'm just intently listening, most of the time with just my eyes closed and headphones on. Mm-hmm. Or in the dark too. Yeah. I don't really want any distractions. I'm trying to be sensitive to everything that's going on in that palette.
Right. And then do you try to figure out what's going on musically?
I can kind of tell what's going on even without playing some of it,
sure.
But some of it is just like,
what's happening here?
I think finally hearing that Smile version of Wonderful did make me go to a guitar and try, wait a second, what in the world?
Yeah, okay.
Because I could hear the movement in the chords and the bass movement a lot better than you can on the Smiley Smile version. It's an organ, and the bass notes are really kind of anyway. Blah blah blah.
Music stuff.
Also, during this time was when I called David Leaf and started a correspondence with him when I lived in Texas going to school, and he sent me some Smile stuff. Brian, that was in the late 80s, and Brian was talking about putting out Smile and letting people program it however they wanted to with their CD players. Meaning that guys could play this in any order, kind of like how I was going to record it. Mm-hmm. And he thought that was kind of cool. But there's one other man that I need to make huge mention of, and I need to grab his book. Dominic Priori, I think is how you say his name. But this is the Bible on Smile.
It's a yellow book. It has
It's called Look, Listen, Vibrate, Smile, which all comes from the marketing of the original Smile campaign, because Capitol made millions of cover slicks, and it was supposed to come out. It was heavily advertised, but this whole book is just all newspaper articles, magazine articles, contracts, everything you ever wanted to know about Smile. And he made this I think he did this in the 80s, and I ordered it. This is the revised, maybe this isn't the newer edition, but I've got to speak with him a little bit too. But thank God for Dominic, because he's written this and another book back here. He's a big reason Smile was kept alive and resuscitated and brought to the full grandeur that it is today. So thank you, Dominic. Yeah. So to end this episode, I thought it was really cool to tell a little Van Dyke Parks story. In 1994, I was at my friend John Hartford's house. Podcast listeners might know who John Hartford is. He one of his most famous things is he wrote Gentle on My Mind for Glenn Campbell, which was a huge, huge #1 hit worldwide in the late 60s. But John was a wonderful, versatile, talented musician that I was very, very lucky enough to know through the fiddle world. And I got to share some pretty special time with him. And I was at his home in outside Nashville, Tennessee in 1994 visiting him. And I was in his office, and I looked down on his desk. And this is the early 90s. CDs had just come out. It's a CD copy of Dyke Parks' Song Cycle. And I went, whoa, Song Cycle? And John said to me, he goes, oh, you know Van Dyke? And I go, no, I don't know Van Dyke. He goes, what do you know about Van Dyke? And I said, oh, that he's Brian Wilson's lyricist on all the Smile stuff and everything. Oh, are you a Brian Wilson fan? Yeah, that's another story. But anyway, he's excited that I know who Van Dyke Parks is. And he says, well, here you go. Here's his name and number. When you get home to Texas, I want you to call him and tell him that John Hartford told you to call.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I rode back to Texas over the next couple of days with a buddy of mine. And when I got home, I picked up the phone, and very nervously one day I dialed that number and got an answering machine. And it just said, Mr. Parks, my name's Matthew Hartz. I'm a fiddle player from living in Texas, and I'm a friend of John Hartford's, and he said to give you a call, and hey, I'm just a big fan, and that's it, blah, blah, hung up. Never expecting to ever hear anything.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and it was about 2 weeks later that I was sitting down at my kitchen table doing some bills or something. It was like I think a Sunday morning. Phone rings, and this is no cell phones. This is a phone on the wall with a cord.
Uh-huh.
You got to pick it up because I don't even have an answering machine probably at that time. And pick it up and hello. And the voice on the other end says, I'm thinking German descent. What? I'm thinking German descent. I go, excuse me. He says, the Harz Mountains in Germany, German descent. And I go, yeah, who is this? He says, well, Matthew Hartz, this is Van Dyke Parks, and any friend of John Hartford's is a friend of mine.
How cool.
Yeah, and so it started like that, which is perfect. I to have the story and to have the phone conversation start like that was just magical, and got to have a wonderful conversation with him. He talked to me about the fiddle stuff. He said next time I was in LA, he wanted to do coffee, and he wanted me to read a couple of Kurt Vonnegut books so we could discuss them.
Oh, okay.
The story on that is I never read the books, and I think I did get to LA one time shortly after that and tried to hit him up for coffee, and we never did do it. But anyway, it was a wonderful conversation, and he spent a lot of time with me on the phone. But just having a beautiful friend like John Hartford, who so many people respect and revere, to connect me with Van Dyke Parks and facilitate that phone conversation that day was pretty magical, and will always be one of the most magical stories of my life.
Wow, that is pretty cool.
So there's my Van Dyke Parks Smile story.
Yeah,
today.
That's pretty awesome, and that covers it for this episode.
I think so.
Cool.
I think
All
that
right.
does.
Well, once again, thank you everybody for listening. We will see you next week with we'll figure something out. Where are we headed next? Do we even know?
Well,
I'm sure you know. I don't.
Yeah, I do.
It'll be a surprise for our listeners. Okay, well, we will see you next week. Thanks for listening.